All right, so today we're going to be talking about ecology. So, ecology is the study of the ecosystem, which is plants and animals and their habitats and how they interact with each other. So, here we have what's called levels of organization. And so, levels of organization are basically ways we can classify groups um, of of animals or plants or whatever. So the smallest level is in the individual, and so that's a single organism. And then when you have multiple organisms of the same species in the same area, that's a population. So species is somebody, so they're organisms that can procreate and produce fertile offspring. So that's a definition of a species. So they they can have kids who themselves can have kids. So for example, like tigers can have other tigers, right? They can have kids, but a lion and a tiger can produce an offspring, which people call a liger, but a liger cannot have further offspring. A liger is infertile, so therefore that makes tigers and lions different species. And communities are multiple populations. So if you have tigers living in a jungle, and the jungle has other animals or other plants like trees or what have you, and that's a community. And the ecosystem is a community, but includes non-living things. Non-living, items or so. Like it includes if there's water around, or it includes, like the rocks or what have you. So ecosystem includes the non-living things, and so the non-living things we call abiotic. So biotic means living, and abiotic means non-living. Multiple ecosystems in a similar location is a biome. And then finally, the biosphere, which is the Earth. Okay, so this is just used so that we can have a word for these different things. And so if we talk about an individual, we're talking about a single organism. If we talk about a community, we're talking about like multiple populations. And so it's just a kind of vocabulary, so to speak. So here's a really good picture. So you have an individual, and then you have multiple fish, a community, like underwater, you got jellyfish, crabs, and then the ecosystem includes the water itself. The biome includes, it's kind of a larger thing. The biosphere is everything as well. So the biome, in this case, the biome might be like what's occurring underwater, right? So a biome is just a larger ecosystem. All right, so a food chain is how we show the flow of energy. So it's important to know that a food chain is the flow of energy. And so there's missing a couple of things here. Energy actually flows from the sun to produce the corn. And the snake, the lizard, they eventually will die, and they'll decompose. All right, and so we have names for all these. So if you remember, so the decomposed things are like fungi or bacteria. They all are good decomposers. So what they do is they take the dead animal, and they're able to break them down into nutrients. Those nutrients can be used to grow corn, because it's found in the soil. So if you remember, this is called a producer, right? The corn is called a producer. And then these are called consumers. Now the first consumer is called a primary. And then this is the secondary consumer. And this is the third, or the what we call tertiary consumer. All right, and remember other terms for producers is an autotroph. They produce their own energy, right? They don't have to eat. They produce it from the sun. And then so these are heterotrophs. So one thing we want to note is that the arrow shows the direction of energy. So for example, the sun gives the corn energy to grow, and then the locust, the energy goes from the corn to the locust when the locust eats the corn, right? So some people mistaken the arrow by who eats who, but it's actually the way the energy flows. Okay? And so we can have more complicated. So instead of talking about a food chain, now we're talking about a food web. And so here we have corn. These all are producers. And here you would say this is more of our, now this gets a little tricky, but let's just say it's like this. So here's your primary consumer. Here are your consumers, so this is your primary. So another way to do this is you can put the first degree consumer is also known as primary, secondary consumer, and third degree. That's your tertiary. And then these are also levels. So we call these trophic levels. So you could have, this is your first trophic, second trophic level, third trophic level, fourth trophic level. So producers are always your first trophic level, they're the bottom. Second is your primary consumer. And also if we think of what these are called, we call the first consumer an herbivore because it only eats plants. And these are carnivores because they only eat other animals. So humans could be a primary consumer because we can eat plants, but we could also be a secondary consumer since we also eat meat, or some of us do at least. So here's trophic levels that I talked about. And so here's the energy pyramid. So like here's your first trophic level, second trophic level, and third. And so the 10% rule is only 10% of energy is passed to the next trophic level. What that means is when you eat something, you're only using 10% of the energy. And so there's only 10% is passed. So what that means is at the very top of your energy pyramid, you can only have a small amount, right? Because let's just say like there's 100 plants, and so that can only support 10 animals or herbivores, which can only supplant one, right? Because I'm divided by 10. It's only 10%. So 10% of 100 is 10. 10% of 10 is 1. And so that's why there's so few predators, because there's not enough. Because you lose a factor of 10 every time. So you can only have so many at the top. You can only have so many third trophic level animals. All right, that looks like it's it.